Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Happy New Year to all of you. We wanted to start the new year with stories of hope. What we got instead was a military leak. Russia's secret war plans leaked. They have details of 160 potential targets in Japan and South Korea. But why these countries? And is Russia planning another war? We'll talk about it on the show. Meanwhile, Ukraine has shut off Russian gas flowing into Europe. It will hurt all sides, Russia, Ukraine and Europe. We'll tell you who will be the biggest loser. In the US, the H-1B visa war continues to intensify. Donald Trump has finally weighed in. Which side does he support? We'll tell you. What is the new Taiwanese board game that simulates a Chinese invasion? Why Elon Musk is enemy number one for German politicians? How Ivory Coast has become the latest African country to expel French troops? A special report on the quick commerce revolution in India. Why Joe Biden is now being called the vacationer-in-chief. He spent 40% of his time as president on vacation. What's the New Year's economy and how do you contribute to it? And on the first day of 2025, we draw up a to-do list for India. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. In the US, a driver plows his truck into a crowd in New Orleans, killing at least 10 people and injuring 30 others. The area was packed with revelers celebrating the new year when the attack took place. The truck driver has been shot dead. A suspected improvised explosive device has been found at the crime scene. India is an important neighbor, says Bangladesh's army chief, admits that Dhaka is dependent on New Delhi in many ways. The general says Bangladesh won't act against India's strategic interests. The ties between the two countries have been strained since former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was ousted in August last year. Iran will hold nuclear talks with the UK, France and Germany on the 13th of January. The meeting will take place in Switzerland. The three countries have accused Tehran of growing its uranium stockpile and threatened to restore sanctions against it. Talks to revive the Iran nuclear deal have been stalled since the US withdrew from it in 2018. A major power outage plunges Puerto Rico into darkness on New Year's Eve. Authorities say the restoration could take up to 2 days. Puerto Rico is a U.S. island territory. While the cause of the outage is still being investigated, initial findings point to a fault in an underground cable. And Guinea's junta leader says 2025 will be a crucial election year. The junta seized power in the West African country in 2021. They had promised to hand over power to a civilian government by the end of 2024 and to hold a constitutional referendum, but neither has happened so far. The past few years have been defined by conflicts, like the wars in Ukraine and West Asia. They have dominated global headlines. And as we begin a new year, this trend is expected to continue. Tonight, we'll tell you about some leaked military documents. These are from Russia. They're leaked Russian war plans, and they're not about Ukraine. Their target is Japan and South Korea. The Russian military has drawn up a list of 160 potential targets spread across Japan and South Korea. 160 targets. These include both military and civilian locations. And Russia seems prepared to hit them. It has a detailed playbook for the eastern frontier. Tonight, we'll tell you what it says, starting with the most basic question: why? Why has Russia drawn up these war plans? Is it going to launch another war? Not immediately. These secret war plans were prepared between 2008 and 2014, so they're old. Russia uses these plans to train its troops. This is standard war gaming. Most militaries do it to keep soldiers war ready. But what's different in this case, or what's shocking, is the scale. Like I said, there are 160 potential targets, out of which 82 are military sites. From airfields to radars and naval installations, this list covers all, 82 of them. And the rest are civilian targets. These include nuclear power plants, fuel refineries, steel and chemical factories, transportation tunnels, even bridges. These plans come with detailed notes. Let me give you some examples. One of the slides talks about South Korea's command and control bunkers. Russian officials have left some notes there. They describe how much force they will need to breach these South Korean bunkers. Another slide talks about a Japanese radar base. It has precise measurements of the building. Some slides also talk about Russian weapons, weapons that Russian forces can use to hit the targets. One of them is KH-101. This is a non-nuclear cruise missile. Back in November, Russia used the same missile in Ukraine. This is a lethal weapon. It has a range of up to 5,000 kilometers. These missiles can fly low and avoid radar systems too. Now, this leak should alarm Tokyo and Seoul. Just look at the depth of planning by Russia. They have narrowed down on specific targets. They have identified vulnerabilities. They even know which weapons to use where. But again, why would Russia launch an attack in the east? Two possible scenarios come to mind. The first involves the Kuril Islands. This is a group of 32 islands in Russia's far east. This is a contested territory. The dispute dates back to the Second World War. Both Russia and Japan claim these islands. The Japanese call them northern territories. As of today, they are in Russian control. There are around 20,000 Russians on the Kuril Islands. In 2024, this dispute caused friction between the two sides. Russia has been militarizing these islands. It has also blocked visits by foreign ships, and all of this has frustrated Japan. At this rate, it could spark a conflict. That is the first scenario, the territorial dispute between Japan and Russia. The second scenario involves the United States, the arch rival of Russia. The Americans have a big military presence in this region. They are the key security providers to Japan and South Korea. I'll give you some numbers. In South Korea, the US has 73 bases. 73 bases in South Korea, more than 26,000 American troops. Then we come to Japan. There are 120 American military bases in Japan and more than 50,000 American troops. These numbers are quite significant, and they make Russia uncomfortable. Moscow fears that if a war breaks out with NATO, its eastern flank could be exposed. The US could strike Russia in the east by using its military assets in Japan and South Korea. And that is why Moscow has prepared these war plans. They can be used in a potential counterattack. These plans also highlight a strategic shift. Clearly, Russia is paying more attention to the east, and this is evident from its growing alliances in the region too. Moscow already had a strong partnership with China. Now with the war in Ukraine, it has also strengthened ties with Pyongyang. The result is a deeper military partnership. First, North Korea supplied bombs to Russia. Now it is sending soldiers to fight in Ukraine. Russia is also reaching out to Central and Southeast Asia. This was largely spurred by Western sanctions. The epicenter of the great power rivalry is shifting. In the past, Europe was the only battleground, but now Asia is witnessing rapid militarization. Whichever way you look at it, these developments are concerning. They raise the risk of conflict in the months and years ahead. Ukraine has shut off the Russian gas tap, that too in the middle of winter. They had a 5-year transit deal with Moscow, a deal that expired by the end of 2024. Kiev had the option of extending the deal last month, but Volodymyr Zelensky said no. He said Russian gas would not be allowed to flow via Ukrainian land. It's a decision that affects all sides. Russia loses money in gas sales, Europe loses energy supplies, and Ukraine loses transit fees. So the question is, who is the bigger loser? First, some facts. Russia has long been the dominant gas supplier to Europe. You have pipelines connecting the two sides. There are pipelines over Ukraine, over Belarus, over the Baltic Sea, and over Turkey. The ones over Ukraine are the most important. Russia has been using them since 1991. Even after the war began, the war in Ukraine, Russian gas flowed through Ukraine. It's a deal that worked for both sides. Ukraine got around $800 million in annual fees, and Russia got a short route to Europe. But Zelensky says no more. He has given up the transit fees to end Russian supplies. And what's the fallout? Well, limited so far. European energy prices are only marginally up. And this is very different from the shock of 2022. Do you know why? Because this time Europe is prepared. In 2021, Russia made up 40% of Europe's gas imports. By 2023, their share had fallen to 8%, which means Europe has diversified. They are buying more gas from other places, from the US and Qatar, hence the limited impact. But some countries in Eastern Europe will be worried, especially Slovakia. Around 1/3 of their gas comes from Russia. So their prime minister is furious. His name is Robert Fico. He visited Moscow last week and met President Putin. And today he lashed out at Ukraine. He said the move would hurt Europe, not Russia.
The grass always suffers. I do not want Slovakia to be such grass, as we see these days when the transit of gas through Ukraine is stopped, which will have drastic impacts on all of us in the European Union, but not on the Russian Federation.
Putin said the same thing last month. He said Russia is always willing to supply gas, but that Ukraine is politicizing the issue.
We did not terminate the contract. They said that would not extend it. If that's what they want, so be it. They are hand-fed by Europe. Because, like I said, without European support, Ukraine not only is not able to battle, but cannot exist in general. And now, Ukraine punishes Europe by shutting down the transit contracts.
There are two things to note here. Number one, it's a big loss for Russia. They stand to lose $5 billion in gas sales, that too in the middle of a crisis. In 2023, Russia's state-owned Gazprom recorded $7 billion in losses, their first annual loss since 1999. So Putin can downplay this as much as he wants, but it is a setback. That is point number one. Point number two, the impact on Europe will be mixed. Western Europe is not panicking like they did in 2022. They are prepared for this. And Eastern Europe, well, they're concerned, but not panicking yet. Hungary is getting Russian gas from Turkish pipelines. Austria cancelled its Russian deal last month, which basically just leaves Slovakia. So right now, it's not a bloc-wide energy crisis. The only country that's really suffering is Moldova. It's a former Soviet republic that borders Ukraine. They get most of their energy from Russia, but last month, Russia cut it off. Moscow says Moldova has racked up $709 million in debt. But Moldova says it's only $8 million. Either way, Russia cut off supplies last month, so Moldova has declared a state of emergency. Thousands are bracing for power cuts and blackouts. It's being called energy blackmail. In 2022, this was Putin's ultimate weapon. He used gas money to bankroll his invasion. He also used it as leverage against Europe. But 3 years later, it's not as effective. Europe has moved away from Russian gas, and Moscow has not been able to find alternative buyers. Unlike oil, you cannot just pack up gas into containers and ship them. You either need direct pipelines to transport gas, or you must convert the gas into liquid form and then ship it. It's very expensive and time-consuming. India, for example, buys a lot of Russian oil, but very little Russian gas. So Putin's energy threats are not as deadly as they used to be. Luckily for him, he's ahead on the battlefield, and with Donald Trump's help, he may not need energy blackmail.
Thank you, Mr. President!
We need competent people. We need smart people coming into our country. We need a lot of people coming in. We're going to have jobs like we've never had before.
This is a wonderful day.
The MAGA camp is like siblings right now, fighting for their parents' approval. On what? The H-1B visa for skilled migrants. One side says it hurts American workers. The other side says it will preserve American excellence. And yesterday, the parent weighed in. I'm talking about Donald Trump, the president-elect. He hosted a New Year's party at his home in Florida. The reporters asked him about his position on the H-1B visa. Listen to the reply.
To voice up, we have to have the most competent people in our country. We need competent people. We need smart people coming into our country. We need a lot of people coming in. We're going to have jobs like we've never had before.
This is the second time Trump is clarifying. He has said twice now that he supports the H-1B visa program. So why is there still confusion? Because of two reasons. Number one, Trump's far-right supporters do not like H-1B. They want the program to be scrapped. They've also unleashed a racist campaign against Indian Americans because Indians are the biggest H-1B beneficiaries. That is one reason. Secondly, Trump himself was against H-1B. In his first term as president, he drastically reduced visa approvals. By 2018, the rejection rate had shot up to 24%. 24% applications were rejected. And this was no surprise because Trump campaigned on reducing foreign labor. Listen to his remarks. These are from 2016. This is what Donald Trump said in 2016. I will end forever the use of the H-1B as a cheap labor program and institute an absolute requirement to hire American workers first for every visa and immigration program. No exceptions. But now he says he's always supported it. You can see why it's confusing. But the question is, what brought about this change? Why has Trump shifted his position? It's because of the tech community. Most H-1B visas are used by big tech, the technology companies. And they supported Trump's campaign this time. Elon Musk, for example, he loves the program. His companies are among the top users of H-1B. So Donald Trump is leaning towards his new tech supporters and saying what they would like to hear. For countries like India, this is a positive signal. But there are two factors to note. One, the voter sentiment. Immigration and jobs were key issues in this election. Americans chose Donald Trump because he promised to create more jobs, not for migrants, but for Americans. And the polls support this. Only 26% Americans want to hire more foreign workers in high-skilled jobs. 60% say, make do with what we have. Meaning, hire American, not foreign workers. How long will Trump ignore this sentiment? That is the first factor to note. Secondly, Elon Musk has slightly backpedaled on his position. He recently said the H-1B system is broken. He said it's in need of urgent reform, like increasing the minimum salary requirement or asking employers to pay annual fees for using the program. Basically, make H-1B visas more expensive. And what would that achieve? It would discourage firms from using the visa liberally. Instead, they would only use it when absolutely necessary. Let me explain this. Tech firms don't use H-1B out of the goodness of their heart. They use it because H-1B labor is cheaper. Around 60% of these visa holders are paid less than the average wage. And let's say the salary threshold is raised or the annual fee is hiked. Then it would erase this wage gap. Meaning it would not make sense to use the H-1B anymore if you're only doing it to save costs. That's not just bad news for Indians, but also bad news for these companies because they will have to pay more money. Is this what Donald Trump is trying to do? Or will he continue with the way things are? Well, that's the question he has not answered yet. If you think about it, this is a story of injustice all around. The far right hates having too many Indians in America. For them, it's not about skills or wages, it's about race. Meanwhile, tech firms love having H-1B workers around, but for them, it's all about paying less about exploiting the non-American workers. Neither side is fighting the good fight here. It's just injustice of two different kinds. Our next story is about a board game. It's called 2045. This game brings geopolitics to your table. How? By simulating a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Players must choose their cards and defend the island. For many, this hits too close to home. Taiwan is a self-ruled island, but China considers it as part of its territory. It's something Xi Jinping mentioned in his New Year's address as well. The Chinese president said, "No one can stop Taiwan's reunification." And how has Taipei reacted? Their president, Lai Ching-te, wants to increase the defense budget. So where is this equation going, and will the new game capture these real-world tensions? Our next report tells you.
The game is called 2045. It simulates an armed conflict. Taiwan fighting a Chinese invasion. The scene is set 10 days before the attack. Players can be anything from Taiwan soldiers, Chinese spies, pro-China politicians, and citizens defending their home. The game highlights the chaos and complexities of war. Each decision brings players closer to victory or defeat.
Through this game, it can help players to understand where the PLA may land. Although I care about political issues, I'm not very knowledgeable on military matters. Therefore, through this game, I learn about where the PLA may land in Taiwan and launch an attack.
The board game was developed by Mizo Games. They started raising money in August, and within 3 months, they had over $120,000, surpassing their original target by 4,000%. The game will not just release in Taiwan, it will also be available in the United States and Europe.
There are 3 reasons that the 2045 game chose China's war on Taiwan as its backdrop. Firstly, it is an ongoing situation. As we know, it is not quite peaceful around Taiwan Island and the Western Pacific as we speak. Secondly, 2045 is set in a scenario 20 years from now, so international and domestic players can both experience this prophetic scenario. Lastly, the game can be interpreted from the perspective of a Taiwanese.
Now, Taiwan is no stranger to the stakes of the game. After all, it's part of the reality they live in. Taiwan is a self-ruled democracy, but China considers it part of its territory. Beijing has vowed to annex the island by force if necessary, and it's something Xi Jinping talked about in his annual New Year's address.
The people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait are one family. No one can sever our family bonds, and no one can stop the historical trend of national reunification.
Just today, Taiwan detected 2 Chinese aircraft and 7 Navy vessels near the island, and Taipei has reacted to all of this. President Lai Ching-te says he wants to engage with China, but says Beijing is the obstacle that's stopping these cross-strait exchanges. He's also vowed to boost the island's defense budget, adding that Taiwan is crucial to the line of defense of democracy globally.
I still want to stress this. Taiwan hopes to have healthy and orderly exchanges with China under the principles of reciprocity and dignity. Being friends with the world through democracy is a way to ensure stability and peace. The safer Taiwan is, the safer the world will be. The stronger Taiwan is, the more solid the world's democratic defense line will be.
So as tensions simmer in real life, the game of 2045 becomes more than just a board game. For many, it's a glimpse into a future that feels uncomfortably close. A tool to understand strategy, sacrifice, and the complexities of conflict, but also a reminder of the high stakes in the region. As players move their pieces across the board, the real question remains, can diplomacy prevail before such scenarios become a reality?
Elon Musk is making headlines again, this time in Germany. Germany will have elections on the 23rd of February. and the world's richest man wants to influence them. Musk has backed a political party in Germany. It's called the Alternative for Germany, abbreviated to AfD because Germans call their own country Deutschland, so AfD. Now, Elon Musk is backing the AfD to the hilt. A few days ago, he put out this post saying that only the AfD can save Germany. This, by the way, is Elon Musk's new account name. He changed it recently, which is a whole new story. But for the moment, we'll stick to Germany and how Musk has endorsed a political party there. He doubled down over the weekend. He had an opinion piece published in a German newspaper. The paper published his views alongside a rebuttal. Nonetheless, Elon Musk's thought process is available for the German public to see. And this has caused an uproar, especially among German politicians, the ones whom Musk has not endorsed. First, you have the outgoing German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. He gave his New Year's address last night and he made a pointed reference to Elon Musk.
Liebe Mitbürgerinnen und Mitbürger,
You will decide, the citizens. It's not up to the owners of social media. In our debates, you can sometimes get the impression that the more extreme the opinion, the greater the attention it garners. But it's not who shouts the loudest who decides what happens in Germany, but the vast majority of sensible and decent people. This also applies to the upcoming Bundestag elections on February 23rd.
Scholz says it's up to the German people to choose their leaders, not the owners of social media platforms. And Scholz is not the only one saying this. Germany's Vice Chancellor, Robert Habeck, retweeted this message, accusing Musk of wanting to weaken Europe. Remember, the AfD is a Eurosceptic party. They don't like the idea of the European Union, and that's the reason behind this accusation that Musk is trying to weaken Europe. Now, both Scholz and Habeck are part of the outgoing government. They were bound to criticize Musk, but the opposition too is unhappy with him. This is a post by Friedrich Merz, the leader of the Christian Democratic Union. His party is leading in the opinion polls, and he is poised to become Germany's next chancellor. He is not happy with Musk's election interference. He's called it intrusive and presumptuous. And he has a point. Musk is intruding on German politics. He is not a German citizen, so why is he getting so involved? Well, Elon Musk says it's because he has a Tesla factory near Berlin, so he has skin in the game. But the German politicians are not convinced. They see Musk as an opponent. He's making their lives more difficult, and that is why they're all lashing out. But the simple fact is, Musk is not doing anything illegal. He's just exercising his right to free speech. He is the richest man on earth. He owns one of the biggest social media platforms on the planet. So his speech is simply amplified. But he's not technically doing something wrong. It's just that German politicians don't like what he's saying, and they have no way to stop him. That is why they're seething. And this is the new reality. Social media is a double-edged sword. People like Musk can weaponize it and use it to influence elections. That is the reality of today. Just like using traditional media to influence voters was the reality of yesterday. Many Western newspapers and magazines have told people in far-off lands about who they should and should not vote for. When someone complained, they cited freedom of speech. Of course, social media is more complicated with its algorithms and echo chambers, and governments don't really know how to tame this beast. But what about voters? What can you as an average citizen do about this? How can you get Musk to back off? Well, he's a businessman. If you really want him to stop, hit him where it hurts. Stop using X, stop buying Teslas, don't opt for Starlink if it comes to your country. Protest with your wallet. That's the only thing you can do. Frankly, the German politicians are acting ridiculous, complaining about Elon Musk on X, basically giving him more money every time someone views their post. This is counterproductive. If Musk bothers them so much, they should be deleting X from their phones. If not, they're just adding to his influence. Our next story is from Africa, from Côte d'Ivoire in the west. In English, that's the Ivory Coast. The country has a New Year's resolution. It has made a pledge to kick out French troops. That's right, Paris has lost yet another African stronghold. The Ivory Coast is the latest country to show France the door. It follows other former French colonies like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, and Senegal. But what has led to this situation? And how will Ivory Coast's move affect French plans? Our next report has the details.
Mali in 2022, Niger in 2023, Chad just now in December 2024. Former French colonies in Africa are growing accustomed to this sight. Scenes of French soldiers packing their bags and leaving. It's been happening every year since 2022.
My dear compatriots, dear brothers and sisters, we can be proud of our army, whose modernization is now a reality. It is within this framework that we have decided on the coordinated and organized withdrawal of French forces from Ivory Coast. Thus, the camp of the 43rd Marine Infantry Battalion in Port Bouet will be handed over to the Armed Forces of Ivory Coast starting this January 2025.
The next French troop withdrawal will take place in the Ivory Coast. It's scheduled for this month. France will hand over a military base in Abidjan to the Ivorian government. This is a hammer blow to French military ambitions in Africa, and it caps off a horrible few years for Paris. France was once a major colonizing power in West and Central Africa. It controlled multiple countries and millions of people. The French colonial empire in Africa broke up in the 1960s, but France maintained a strong military presence in its former colonies. Paris controlled multiple military bases in Africa. It had thousands of troops stationed in the continent, and things continued this way for decades. But the dominoes started to fall a few years ago. It started with military coups in 3 Sahel countries: Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. The new military juntas weren't fans of the French presence, so one by one they began kicking French troops off their soil. Soon, other former colonies began protesting against the presence of French troops, coup-hit ones like Chad and stable ones like Senegal as well. Now, the Ivory Coast has joined them. The Ivory Coast is considered a staunch ally of France. They share warm ties, but even Abidjan doesn't want anything to do with French troops anymore. Part of this could be political. The Ivory Coast goes to polls in October. Anti-France sentiment has taken hold of all of West Africa. So President Alassane Ouattara might be playing it smart, appeasing the public during an election year. But even countries nowhere near elections have had enough of the French troops. Along with the Ivory Coast, Senegal has made an announcement as well.
I have instructed the Minister for the Armed Forces to propose a new doctrine for cooperation in defense and security involving, among other consequences, the end of all foreign military presences in Senegal from 2025.
That's another dependable French ally, telling France to pack up and leave in 2025. And Senegal doesn't go to polls till 2029. There doesn't seem to be any ulterior motive. They just seem done with the French military presence. This is a major setback for France. Paris had relied on its African bases to project power. They helped France wield influence in its former colonies. But now, that influence has all but dried up. After the French troops leave the Ivory Coast and Senegal, France will have a military footprint in only 2 former African colonies: Gabon in Central Africa and Djibouti far in the east. Reports say there are only about 350 troops in Gabon. This token force is expected to remain, but it's effectively the end of French military presence in its former West and Central African colonies. French President Emmanuel Macron recently made a speech in Djibouti. He said he wanted to change the logic of French military presence in Africa. By the looks of it, Africa has made the change for him.
Need a Diet Coke? Guess what? You can have it delivered in just 8 minutes. Craving some eggs to go with it? Add them to your cart. Feeling bold and want to throw in an iPhone? Yep, that's possible too. If you're in India, you know what I'm talking about. For those tuning in from around the globe, welcome to India's quick commerce revolution. Quick commerce, or QCom as it's called. A midnight snack, a last-minute gift, or an urgent charger, anything and everything can be delivered at your doorstep in under 30 minutes. It is fast and seamless, and it is redefining the way we shop. Take New Year's Eve, for example. Quick commerce platforms received record order volumes, far higher than they did in 2023. In the last 2 years, their sales have shot up by 280%. That's right, 280%. In 2021, the total merchandise sold was worth $500 million. In 2023, it was $3.3 billion. That's a 280% hike in 2 years. Leading this revolution are a handful of platforms like Swiggy, Blinkit, and Zepto. They have set new benchmarks in delivery speed, and now other companies want to join this race, like Flipkart. In August, it launched its quick commerce service. It's called Flipkart Minutes. Amazon, too, wants to launch a similar service this year. It's the first time the company is venturing into quick commerce anywhere in the world. Fashion giant Myntra is doing it too. It has launched a 30-minute delivery service. So have Tata and Nykaa. So everyone is entering the fray. They want to ride the Q-com wave. But is this rise sustainable? Or is it a bubble waiting to burst? And here's why we ask. The success of Q-com hinges on one thing, and that is robust infrastructure. You need a network of micro warehouses, also known as dark stores. And you need delivery networks. All of these have to be strategically placed so that platforms can ensure ultra-fast delivery. Now, this is not a problem in India's urban centers. In cities like Delhi, Mumbai, and Bengaluru, they have both the demand and the logistical capabilities. But the problem begins when you move beyond these cities. Scaling this model in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities is going to be challenging. The costs will be high with more last-mile complexities. And this is what keeps smaller towns and rural areas out of this trend. But it works like magic in urban centers because of the convenience. It's their biggest selling point. It's also a double-edged sword, though. Speedy delivery makes the platforms attractive, but it also erodes their profitability. If their convenience fee is too high, they risk losing customers. If it's too low, they don't make money. Take Zepto, for example. Its revenue grew by 14 times in 2023, but so did the losses. In 2022, Zepto posted a loss of 390 crore rupees. In 2023, it went up to 1,272 crore rupees. That's the losses. So while the model may be attractive, the platforms are bleeding money. Then how are they still running? They're running thanks to external funding. Investors are betting big on quick commerce. These bets are driven by growth potential, not by profitability. Platforms like Swiggy have sky-high valuations, so they get cash injections to cover operational costs. But you can only do it for so long. At some point, you will have to make money. The other vulnerability are the delivery personnel. They form the backbone of Q-com. They work for long hours with low pay. There are no job benefits, no job security. The attrition rates are extremely high. To retain workers, companies will have to offer more, else this model won't hold up. So to sum it up, Q-com may be reshaping India's retail landscape. A PS5 in 10 minutes is pretty impressive, you have to agree. Currently, India's Q-com market is valued at $3.3 billion. By 2029, it could be worth $10 billion. The Zepto CEO says it could rival e-commerce very soon. And this is a big achievement for India, for its internet ecosystem. India could become the world's first Q-com success story. But only if the platforms can achieve long-term viability. To survive, they will have to do more. They'll have to expand beyond cities, ensure sustainable working conditions, and balance affordability with profitability. The clock is ticking because this is not just a race for deliveries. It's also a race for survival. Joe Biden is back in the US. He has returned from a swanky vacation in the Virgin Islands. It is his last holiday before Trump takes office on January 20th. And it's creating a lot of buzz on the internet. No, shirtless Biden pictures are not going viral again. This time it's because of his new nickname, Vacationer-in-Chief. That's what he's being called, Vacationer-in-Chief. Biden's recent vacation has increased his off days to 570. You heard me right. The 82-year-old US president has taken 570 vacation days. He has spent 40% of his 4-year presidency holidaying. To put it in context, it will take an average American about 48 years to match Biden's holiday record. Why has this fueled a debate? And where does Biden stand in comparison to his predecessors? Here's a report.
Donald Trump takes office on January 20th. So US President Joe Biden has about 3 weeks left to settle his legacy. There's no shortage of national or global challenges demanding his attention. But like any employee serving their notice period, 82-year-old Biden is on vacation mode. Except quite literally. Biden, along with his family, spent his New Year's holidays on a swanky vacation. His traditional getaway to the Virgin Islands, where he has spent most of his time basking in the sun at a beachfront villa. There was little on his public schedule except addressing the death of former President Jimmy Carter on Sunday.
This is a sad day, but it brings back an incredible amount of good memories. Today, America and the world, in my view, lost a remarkable leader.
Now, Biden has finally broken out of his vacation haze, wrapped up his St. Croix getaway, and headed back to the United States before going to Camp David for his final time there before he exits the White House. This is creating a lot of buzz because with this St. Croix trip, Biden has marked his 570th day off. Yes, 570 days of vacation. It's estimated that Joe Biden spent 40% of his entire 4-year presidency on vacation. As per reports, Biden's off time surpasses that of all his predecessors. Donald Trump spent 26% of his presidency on vacation. Ronald Reagan, the 40th US president, and Barack Obama, the 44th US president, each spent only 11% of their 2-term presidencies on vacation. Meanwhile, the 39th US President, Jimmy Carter, took just 79 days off during his single term. 79 versus 570. That's quite a gap. And it only widens further if you look at the vacation days of an average American. They get only 11 off days a year on average. Biden's off days are about 12 times this average. It will take an average American about 48 years to match Biden's holiday record. No wonder Biden has fueled memes with his elaborate plans. This isn't to say that a president shouldn't take a vacation. In fact, it's crucial to get off time from work. It improves well-being, enhances productivity, improves creativity and stress management. Also, when you're the president, you may not get the standard off days that others do. Like the 4th of July in the US is peak travel season. But the president has to stay home and work. Vacations change when you become the commander-in-chief. But much like work, vacations need a balanced approach. Or else a commander-in-chief can quickly become the vacationer-in-chief.
The world has bid goodbye to 2024 and welcomed 2025. Across nations and cultures, we celebrated the New Year's Eve in different ways. But the result was the same. We gave an annual boost to the New Year's economy. It's like an extroverted friend. It comes around once a year and demands that you make extensive plans. So you oblige. The result is not guaranteed, but the collateral damage is. It's your budget. Your New Year's resolution may say manage money better, but your plans manifest entering a new year with an empty bank account. Maybe that's what they mean by a clean slate. So let's do a recap, shall we? If you live in the Netherlands, congratulations, you have helped break a national record, a record for the most money spent on fireworks. With the New Year celebrations, the expenditure reached $122 million for the whole year. And if you're in the UAE, it's a world record for you. With fireworks, aerial pyrotechnics, and more than 10,000 drones fired from more than 60 locations across all 7 emirates. Experts say it could have easily cost $12 million in a single day. Globally, the firework industry is booming, quite literally. It stands at about $3 billion. From Sydney's 9 tons of explosives to London's 12,000 fireworks, it got a major boost last night. People also spent a lot of money buying tickets just to watch these fireworks. Like with Dubai's display from the Burj Khalifa at the keen price of $470 per person. Or the London fireworks on the River Thames, it cost up to $60 per person. More than 100,000 people showed up. You can do the math. Celebrations aside, let's also look at the before and after. All the travel, it fuels the New Year economy. Just look at India. Airfares have surged up to 35%. Hotel rates have risen 3 times. But if people couldn't go out of town, they were going out on the town, splurging. But not how you may think. In Mumbai, about 18,000 people were penalized yesterday. They violated traffic rules because what is New Year's Eve without some drunk driving, apparently? So they were fined, obviously. Do you know their contribution? About $104,000, that's 89 lakh Indian rupees in a single day. So no worries if you did not go out. You contributed to the New Year economy too. India's quick commerce firms, your Blinkit, Swiggy, Instamart, saw record demand yesterday with order volumes like they had never seen before. 853 chips packets were ordered on Swiggy every minute. 200,000 aloo bhujia packets were ordered on Blinkit. And to the app's surprise, grapes joined the Hall of Fame thanks to a social media fad. It has dug up an age-old Spanish tradition of eating 12 grapes on New Year's Eve. Hopefully, Instagram won't land on the Danish New Year tradition. Or you would find Gen Z smashing plates instead of shoveling grapes into their mouth while balancing a glass of champagne, or should we say, a non-alcoholic beverage. Because Big Basket saw a 552% rise in the sales of such beverages, non-alcoholic. This last bit may be surprising, but if you look at the bigger picture, it really isn't. This New Year's economy is not just about one night, it's also about what comes after. The month of January, the month of New Year resolutions. When consumers chase fitness, better budgeting, or new language skills. The world over, January is the one month where alcohol sales almost always go down. Dry January boosts the sales of non-alcoholic drinks. Gym memberships bulk up as well. They peak in the first month with an average increase of 12%. Some other hits include exercise equipment, planner and diary sales, and even sales of storage solutions like containers. They soar by 30% in January. Yes, everyone wants to get their life together and in order. So companies seize the moment. There is a steady stream of gym ads. Personal finance apps offer discounts. So do language apps like Duolingo. This US company offers a discount only once a year, every year. It is in the month of January. It is their biggest customer growth period. But don't get us wrong, this is not a new year, new you, new reality check. Now is the perfect time to look back, to enjoy new beginnings, and to reflect on what you want. Just know that when you bet on a fun New Year's Eve or a successful New Year's resolution, companies are betting on you, and the New Year economy knows it. A new year also means new priorities, a new list of things to do. People have been making such lists for decades now, but we thought, why not countries? Countries and governments should also have priorities. I'm sure they do, a list of things to get done in 2025. We have prepared such a list for India. It's not limited to one particular issue or priority. It covers a number of things, a wide range of things, like what should India tweak about its foreign policy in this year? How should India handle its youth? And how can we reignite economic growth? You may have dozens of things you want the government to do, but we have shortlisted 7. Take a look at India's to-do list for 2025. What's on your bucket list for 2025? Maybe that dream holiday, or getting in shape, or learning a new musical instrument. The new year is the best time to make a list of things to do. So we thought, why not do the same for India? We've got 7 items on this list. things we think should be on the government's mind this year. The first is normalizing cryptocurrency. Let's face it, the crypto bros had the last laugh in 2024. Bitcoin crossed $100,000 after Donald Trump won. He's got big plans for cryptocurrency. He wants to turn the US into the world's crypto capital.
Bitcoin is going to the moon, as we say, it's going to the moon.
We're not saying do the same in India, but at least do more. Right now, crypto profits are taxed at 30%, which is a lot higher than stocks. So the government is basically saying, be careful here. Be wary of cryptocurrency. That attitude certainly needs to change. Crypto may not replace currencies, but it has become an increasingly accepted form of investment. So it's time to normalize it. Of course, that also means appointing a regulator, a headmaster, to keep things tidy. Right now, crypto is regulated by virtually everyone, by the Reserve Bank of India, by the Securities and Exchange Board or SEBI, and by the Finance Ministry. I'm afraid that won't cut it. You need a dedicated regulator to build confidence, preferably someone who doesn't have to Google what is cryptocurrency. Item number 2 is a bit more serious. Building up air defenses. We kept hearing about Israel's Iron Dome last year. Does India need one of those? Well, our country is 300 times bigger than Israel, so a dome may not be practical, but we do need more air defenses. Recently, India has started buying such systems from outside, like the Barak and Spider from Israel and the S-400 from Russia. Some air defenses are also being built at home, like the Akash and Prithvi. But 2 things to keep in mind here. The first is the quantity. You saw the aerial attacks from Iran last year. It wasn't 1 or 2 drones, it was literally hundreds of them. So you need air defenses in bulk, something that the Air Force Chief has also pointed out.
तो एक कॉम्बिनेशन जो है इसका मिला के हमारे पास जो एयर डिफेंस वेपन सिस्टम होंगे वो फेयरली कॉम्पिटेंट होंगे, लेकिन हाँ ये बात सही है कि नंबर्स हमको बहुत ज़्यादा चाहिए होंगे इन टर्म्स अगर हमें सब कुछ प्रोटेक्ट करना है.
Second, you need to be smart about it. Countries are firing dirt cheap weapons nowadays. An Iranian drone costs around $2,000. Do you really want to shoot it down with $1 million weapon? It's not viable for a country like India. We don't have allies giving us billions in military aid. Our defense budget is mostly salaries and pensions, so it's important to be smart and strategic. And speaking of strategy, do you know who wrote India's National Security Strategy Doctrine? You don't, because we don't have one. And that is item number 3. India should codify its National Security Doctrine. Most of the big powers already do it. The US, the UK, Japan, Russia, all of them publish and update their National Security Doctrine. Think of it as a guidebook. It tells you what your interests are, what are your biggest threats, who are your partners, and what is your approach to long-term security. India has tried to make such a document multiple times, the most recent being in 2018. But each time the effort failed. Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar was asked about the need for such a document. His response, if I tell you, I have to kill you.
Every country has its own way of communication, its own way of policy formulation. Because somebody else puts out a document every 3 years or 4 years and says that is my national security, it is not necessary I follow that model. I could have it, I could tell you that it exists, but I have to kill you if I tell you.
Flexibility is the upside, but the downside is confusion. A written policy makes it easier for different agencies to make decisions. It puts everyone on the same page. I'll give you an example. Last year, India's finance ministry called for more investments from China. It said we cannot shut off Chinese businesses. The same year, India's defense ministry issued a directive. It said, do not use Chinese parts in drones. Now, if you follow geopolitics, the differences may be obvious. But if you don't, it can be confusing. A written national security policy could avoid such confusions. It would also add continuity to decision-making. Next is item number 4, sports infrastructure. India is officially bidding for the 2036 Olympics. I know it's 11 years away, but for an event like this, 11 years is nothing, because it takes time to build world-class facilities. Right now, only 10% of India's sporting infrastructure meets the Olympic standard, so major upgrades are necessary. And this is after you win the bid. To win, you need to make a strong case. You must showcase your cultural heritage, you must invest in grassroots sports, and you must present an impressive plan. All of this starts with good infrastructure. Just look at the 2028 Los Angeles Games. The city is not building a new games village. Instead, athletes will stay at the University of California, and they're not building dozens of new stadiums. They are refitting venues used by local football clubs. That is the future of the Olympics. Not massive Colosseum-style stadiums, but multi-purpose structures of the highest quality. And speaking of quality, item number 5 is education. We keep hearing about India's demographic dividend, but that dividend depends on the quality of our population. Let's look at the numbers first. Around 24% of our population is under 14 years of age. That's around 330 million children. If we train and educate them, great. We'll have a strong workforce for the coming decades. But if we don't, it could drag our growth story down. So 2 things must be done on priority. The first is spending more. We spend around 4% of our GDP on education. The target should be around 6%. This money can be used to upgrade our schools. We're talking better services, cheaper meals, more teachers. Apparently, there are 1 million teaching vacancies in Indian schools. You need to pay well to fill them up. This money can also be used for education loans. You see, most Indian colleges are now private, which means you need to pay a higher fee. If you cannot afford that, you could try for an education loan. Just one problem though. Only 4% of India's higher education students have availed a loan. Experts talk about a number of challenges like higher interest rates or unfair eligibility criteria or long drawn-out application times. Perhaps the government could ease things out for them. Which brings us to the second priority, that is the quality of education. There is an urgent need to revamp the syllabus. We are seeing new technologies like artificial intelligence and 6G. It is important to add that to the syllabus, to gear education towards jobs. If not, you will have educated unemployment. In fact, that is the situation right now. Jobless rate for graduates is almost 30%. But it's only 3.4% for people who cannot read or write, which is simply unacceptable. Education should be an asset, not a liability. Now we are down to the last 2 items. Number 6 is reaching out to Africa. That is the missing piece in India's foreign policy. Africa is home to resources worth trillions of dollars. This includes strategic minerals like cobalt, nickel, and manganese. These can be used for making semiconductors and batteries, which is why there's a race for Africa. China, Europe, America, all of them are looking to secure their interests. India too has a sizable footprint, but a lot more needs to be done. India and Africa started a summit back in 2008. It was supposed to be held every 3 years, but the last one was held in 2015. Since then, no summit has been held with Africa. 0 summits in 9 years. Guess how many China held in this time? 4 summits. And this shows in trade numbers too. China's trade with Africa is $282 billion. India's trade is just $100 billion. So the first priority is to hold that summit, to show Africa that India is interested. And the focus should go beyond just pumping money. Because let's face it, if it's a battle of wallets, India cannot beat China or the US. So New Delhi should offer something extra. For example, its lessons on digital economy, or paperless delivery of government schemes, or electronic payment systems like the UPI, or even healthcare services. India is known as the pharmacy of the world, and Africa faces medicine and vaccine shortages. It's a challenge that India should take on. Thankfully, New Delhi seems up for it. We saw an indication of that at the 2023 G20 summit. India led the push to give permanent membership to the African Union. That move has given us a lot of goodwill in the continent. The key is to build on that. Which brings us to our final item. It's something Indians have been asking for a long time. It's also something that ordinary Indians deserve: a tax cut. Indian consumer spending has fallen since the pandemic. As a result, GDP growth also fell. The projection was 7% in the last quarter, but the actual rate was 5.4%. If you want to kickstart spending, you need a tax break. And it's only fair. Less than 2% of Indians actually pay income tax, which is mostly the salaried middle class, and they're also paying GST along with others. It's too much pressure on one group, especially when their employers have it so good. I'm talking about Indian corporates. They're making more money than ever, yet income tax collection is higher than corporate tax collection. Imagine that. Ordinary taxpayers are contributing more than companies. How do you expect people to have disposable income? How do you expect them to spend more? The way we see it, a tax cut is the best bet. Let's see if the government agrees when the budget comes out. But frankly, some of these other items are non-negotiable. It's about national security, about the future of our children, and also our livelihoods. Ideally, they shouldn't wait until a new year to work on these, but if a to-do list helps, why not? Every year starts the same. You begin by saying, this is my year, new me. But by February, you think, next year is looking pretty good. That's the story of most people. Forget new year, new me. It's just new year, same you, but with a gym membership. And if you've always been a gym rat, don't worry. The new year rush does not last forever. It's a bit like Avengers Infinity War. By the end, half the cast will vanish. Jokes aside, we hope this new year will be different. We also hope that you stick to your resolutions. And if you don't be too hard on yourself because the internet already predicted it. And finally, it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We are in 2025, but it took the entire world 26 hours to welcome the new year. From Sydney to New York City, fireworks lit up night skies across the globe. So here's a look at how the world welcomed the new year.